The Galactic Institute of Advanced Sciences prided itself on educating the brightest minds from across 47 stellar civilizations. Professor Zelthor, a distinguished Valkyrian scholar with crystalline skin that refracted light into rainbow patterns, had taught emergency response theory for 3 centuries. In all that time, no species had impressed him less than humanity. "Primitive," he muttered to his teaching assistant, adjusting his translation collar. "They've barely left their planetary system, yet Earth insists on sending students here." The human in question sat in the back row of the lecture hall, a young woman named Jessica Martinez from the United States. She was 23, with dark hair pulled into a practical ponytail, and she had the annoying habit of asking questions that derailed Zelthor's carefully prepared lectures. Today's lesson focused on electromagnetic pulse scenarios, a theoretical exercise where students would need to restore basic civilization functions after a catastrophic EMP attack. Most species approached this with advanced technology, quantum stabilizers, nano-reconstruction swarms, or psionic energy manipulation. "The simulation will begin in 5 minutes, Zelthor announced. "You will be transported to identical disaster zones. The first student to restore power to the emergency beacon wins. You may use any resources available in your assigned sector." The classroom shimmered as the holographic simulation engaged. Jessica found herself standing in a destroyed neighborhood that looked disturbingly like suburban Cleveland. Burned-out cars littered the streets. Buildings stood dark and silent. Every electronic device was fried, just as they would be after a real EMP strike. She took a deep breath and assessed the situation. The emergency beacon sat on a pole 300 yards away, a simple light that needed approximately 50 watts to activate. Everything else was dead. Around the galaxy, her classmates were already deploying sophisticated solutions. The Andromedian student was constructing a miniature fusion reactor from memory. The Cepheid representative was channeling stellar energy through crystalline matrices. The insectoid Klaxion was organizing a bioelectric hive mind to generate collective power. Jessica walked to the nearest house and kicked in the door. "Okay," she said to herself. "What would Dad do?" Her father, Michael Martinez, was a mechanic in Detroit who could fix anything with duct tape, wire, and what he called, good old American stubbornness. Jessica had spent her childhood in his garage, learning that expensive solutions were usually unnecessary when simple physics worked just fine. She found what she needed in the garage: a lawn mower with a dead engine, copper wire, a car alternator, some basic tools, and, critically, a set of strong neodymium magnets that had been used to hold tools on a metal workbench. "Beautiful," she whispered. While her alien classmates continued their complex constructions, Jessica got to work. She stripped the copper wire and wound it carefully around a wooden frame she built from a broken chair. The alternator became the core of her generator. She mounted the magnets to a bicycle wheel she found in the garage, positioning them to spin past the copper coils. The principle was simple: moving magnets past conductive wire created electric current. It was the same technology humans had been using since the 1800s. Nothing fancy. Nothing that required off-world materials or advanced quantum mechanics. She connected the system to the emergency beacon using jumper cables and spare wire. Now came the problem of creating rotational force. The bicycle's pedal system was obvious, but she needed consistent power. She looked around the darkened neighborhood and spotted garden hoses. Within 20 minutes, she'd constructed a crude water wheel using a garbage can lid, plastic bottles, and the hoses to direct water from a nearby stream. As water flowed, the wheel turned. The wheel spun the magnets. The magnets induced current in the copper coils. Electricity flowed. The emergency beacon flickered, once, twice, then blazed to life. Professor Zelthor stared at his monitoring display in disbelief. The human had finished. Impossible. He checked the timestamp, 47 minutes. The next closest student wouldn't complete their fusion reactor for at least another hour. There must be an error, he said, pulling up Jessica's simulation feed. The image showed her sitting on the ground next to her ramshackle generator, eating a candy bar she'd found in the house. The beacon shone brightly above her jury-rigged contraption that looked like it had been assembled by a creative child, not an engineering student. She used garbage, Zelthor said flatly. His teaching assistant leaned closer. Technically, Professor, she used applied electromagnetic principles at their most fundamental level. Faraday's law of induction. Very efficient, actually. The human appears to have optimized for speed and available resources rather than elegance. When the simulation ended and students materialized back in the lecture hall, Jessica found herself surrounded by confused aliens. The Andromedian student, a being of pure energy contained in a crystalline matrix, flickered with what might have been frustration. You did not use proper technology, it buzzed through its translator. That is not how civilized species solve problems. Jessica shrugged. It worked, didn't it? Professor Zelthor stood at the front of the class, his crystalline skin now a muddy brown color that indicated deep confusion. Miss Martinez. Explain your methodology. Sure, Jessica said, pulling up a holographic display of her work. After an EMP, you can't rely on sophisticated electronics. They're all dead. But basic physics doesn't change. Magnets, copper wire, and rotational force will always generate electricity. I just needed to create those conditions using whatever wasn't fried by the pulse. But this is primitive, Zelthor protested. Primitive means reliable, Jessica countered. My solution had 4 moving parts and 0 computer components. Your fancy tech is amazing when it works, but when it breaks, you need a whole factory to fix it. My generator? You could repair it with scrap metal and a screwdriver. A murmur ran through the classroom. Several alien students were rapidly recalculating their assumptions about human intelligence. Furthermore, Jessica continued, gaining confidence, I noticed something while building my generator. I found candles in the house. If the water wheel had failed, I could have used rising hot air from multiple candles to turn a turbine. Heat creates airflow. Airflow creates rotation. Rotation creates electricity. There are a dozen ways to generate power using Stone Age technology, if you understand the principles. Professor Zelthor's skin shifted through several colors before settling on a pale blue, a Valkyrian expression of reluctant respect. Perhaps, he said slowly, humanity's late arrival to galactic civilization is not the disadvantage I assumed. You have spent longer working with limited resources. This has created a certain, practical wisdom. Jessica smiled. We call it making do. When you don't have anti-gravity generators or quantum computers, you get really good at Physics 101. The Andromedian student flickered again. This is most troubling. Our civilization would collapse without our advanced infrastructure. That's kind of the point of the exercise, isn't it? Jessica asked. In a real emergency, the civilization that survives is the one that can rebuild from nothing. As the class filed out, Zelthor stopped Jessica at the door. Miss Martinez. I may have underestimated your species. Most people do, Professor, Jessica replied. We're used to it. Walking back to her dormitory, Jessica messaged her father on Earth. The quantum communication delay meant she wouldn't hear back for hours, but she smiled as she typed, Hey Dad. Remember when you told me that garage skills would matter more than fancy degrees? Turns out you were right. Even in space. Somewhere in Detroit, Michael Martinez would read that message and laugh. His daughter was teaching the galaxy something humanity had known for centuries. When everything goes to hell, the people who know how to build generators from garbage and light with candles are the ones who survive. And that, the aliens were learning, was very human indeed.